W. Somerset Maugham's The Painted Veil is not a touching story about a cheating wife who finally finds herself, nor is it a romantic melodrama about an exotic redemption. It is a terrifyingly precise deep dive into emotional and intellectual bankruptcy. It shows exactly what happens when a shallow, uneducated woman, raised exclusively to trade her looks for a high-status marriage, is forced to pay the ultimate price for an impulsive, brainless love affair. Too many modern readers treat this masterpiece as a soft, romantic period drama about forgiveness and love. Today, we strip away that sentimental lens. We are going to look at this story through a cold, realistic perspective to see how a hollow social butterfly had to be dragged through a literal hell of disease and death, just to burn away the trashy illusions she called her identity. The tragedy begins not with a broken heart, but with a disastrously bad transaction. The protagonist, Kitty, is a shallow London girl who married Walter Fane, a quiet, socially awkward government scientist, not out of love, but out of sheer panic. She needed a quick exit plan to escape her mother's criticism and secure her social status. She invested zero emotional capital into the marriage. In her eyes, Walter's deep, intense love was just a boring liability, an annoying daily overhead cost she had to deal with. When they moved to colonial Hong Kong, Kitty immediately looks for a high-return venture. She falls hard for Charlie Townsend, the charming assistant colonial secretary. Charlie is the perfect salesman of upper-class glamour, giving her the expensive flattery and attention she starves for. Kitty surrenders completely, tricking herself into believing her cheap affair is a grand romance, entirely blind to the fact that her husband's brilliant scientific mind has already audited her betrayal and is preparing a devastating liquidation notice. The true test for Kitty's fragile world arrives when Walter delivers a brutal ultimatum. He doesn't file for a standard divorce. He gives her two choices. Either she travels with him to Mai Tan Fu, a remote Chinese town currently being wiped out by a massive cholera outbreak, or he will instantly launch a public scandal that will permanently ruin her social credit. In this moment, Kitty displays the typical naive dependency of a shallow woman. She runs straight to her lover, Charlie, confident that her romantic knight will protect her. However, she is met with a cold, calculated default on that emotional debt. The second Charlie hears the words scandal and career, his gentlemanly charm vanishes. He refuses to help. He tells her with brutal, pragmatic honesty that his political capital, his wealth, and his wife's elite family connections are worth infinitely more than their cheap bedroom passion. He even coolly tells her to go to the plague district, openly admitting he doesn't care if she dies there. This is the core code of the upper-class predator. Romance and affairs are just cheap consumer goods meant for easy times. They carry zero liability the moment real status is threatened. Kitty looks at the complete collapse of her illusions and experiences a total breakdown. Left with zero emotional credit, she boards the boat to the interior, walking straight into the jaws of a deadly plague. When Kitty and Walter step into this wasteland, where mass death has stripped away all civilization, the fancy codes of Hong Kong society, the status, the balls, the keeping up of appearances, melt into nothing under the weight of reality. Let's look at Walter's strategy with absolute candor. He didn't bring Kitty here to punish her with physical violence. He brought her to execute her mind through the environment. He didn't bring Kitty here to punish her with physical violence. He brought her to execute her mind through the environment. He is using this hellish backdrop to force a slow, painful autopsy on her vanity. He expects her to catch the disease, and he expects to die too. His logical brain simply cannot balance the massive emotional deficit of his broken heart. For the first few weeks, the town is a terrifying isolation cell for Kitty. She is surrounded by mountains of corpses, counting down the days to her own potential death. In this muddy hell where people can barely breathe, her diamonds, her fine manners, and her status are worth absolutely nothing. But right here, in the middle of a biological quarantine, her survival instincts finally kick in. She leaves her suffocating room and walks into the local French convent. There, she sees a group of Catholic nuns quietly washing the blood and waste off orphan Chinese babies. The Mother Superior doesn't care about Kitty's upper-class status or her dramatic marriage problems. She only looks at one metric, utility. For the first time in her life, Kitty is forced to drop her identity as a decorative object. She starts working. She scrubs floors, takes care of sick orphans, and begins using her own labor to build a real budget for self-respect. She realizes the world is infinitely larger than high society living rooms, and that her entire past life was just a cheap, painted veil covering a vacuum. The final liquidation of the emotional ledger arrives not through a movie-style forgiveness, but through the sudden, cold finality of death. Walter pushes his self-destructive experiment too far. He infects himself with the cholera bacteria to run a final test on his own body, and he fails. As he lies dying in a damp, quiet room, Kitty kneels at his bedside. She cries and begs for a sentimental Hollywood ending to clear the debt, but Walter Fane is a scientist who refuses to accept fake balances. He looks at her with a terrifyingly clear mind and delivers the most devastating final line in modern literature. "The dog it was that died." This is a line from an old Oliver Goldsmith poem about a man who was bitten by a mad dog. Everyone thought the man would die, but against all expectations, the man recovered while the dog was the one that died. With his last breath, Walter runs a brutal audit on his own tragedy. He realizes that he was the mad dog. He was the one driven crazy by the poison of jealousy and revenge, using all his intelligence just to destroy a useless social butterfly. But in the end, the environment didn't kill the shallow sinner. It destroyed the brilliant judge who forgot how to actually live. Walter dies, leaving Kitty alone in the ruins of a broken marriage, holding an inheritance paid for in blood. Faced with an independent ledger that has completely cleared away past vanities, wrong turns, and blood debts, the Kitty who walked out of hell chooses to rewrite the standard female script. She doesn't take poison like Madame Bovary, nor does she throw herself under a train like Anna Karenina. On her way home, she even falls back into a weak, physical moment with Charlie Townsend that leaves her deeply disgusted with herself. This time, she is completely awake. She doesn't lie to herself and call it love. She sees it for what it is, just a low-level biological instinct. She completely forgives her own flaws and tears away the elegant veil of social politeness. Ordinary romance stories usually end the moment the couple compromises or dies together. But Mom makes the painted veil a true masterpiece of growth because it refuses to offer any cheap rescue through a man or a simple fairy tale. Kitty returns home carrying a child whose father she doesn't even respect. She no longer needs the praise of a social circle or the empty promises of a charming coward. She makes a final declaration to her father about her independence. She wants to give her daughter a completely different kind of start in life. She won't raise her to be a pretty ornament to please men, but a truly free human being, capable of standing firmly on her own 2 feet. You do not need to buy into the illusions woven by vanity and traditional expectations. Wipe away the toxic emotional trash as bad debt, and turn your pain into a solid currency to rewrite who you are. Beneath the marble floors made of fancy trends, empty promises, and politeness lies the raw, real ground of reality. Through your own clear mind, you will tear away all the veils and build a free path that belongs entirely to you.